So, Johnny Cash, the man in black. So, when we think of Johnny Cash, it's the first image that comes to mind for a lot of us. And I'm a great admirer of his music. A lone figure, clad in a shadow. A voice that sounded like it came from the very heart of country music's soul. Everyone that I know that loves Johnny Cash music, everyone knows that Johnny Cash wore black. Black attire, black suit, black undershirt. But the answer and the question is, why? The answer isn't a simple fashion statement, a political statement, anything like that. It was a reflection of a man who was truly at war with himself inside. He was a poor farmer's son, haunted by tragedy, many personal struggles, and leading to his struggles in his adult life. He was a devout Christian, first and foremost, who became a drug addict and an icon rejected by the very same people and system that he helped build on the country music stage. The story of the Man in Black is the story of how a true testament of a man so full of contradictions, which many who knew Johnny Cash said he was a man of walking contradiction, partly true, partly fiction, became the ultimate symbol of American rebel and American rebellion. Welcome back, Perseverance Pioneers, to the Dialogue Den. So let's get into it. To understand who Johnny Cash was, the Man in Black, you have to trace it all back to his upbringing. You have to trace it all back to the darkness that really ensued in his young life. The darkness that shaped J.R. Cash, who was born in a small town in Arkansas, 1932, into the thick of the Great Depression that crippled America, that bankrupted families. People were starving in the streets, nobody can get work, people lost everything. His world was one of back-breaking labor in the cotton fields, a life that forged a bond internally with him as who he was, a bond with the poor and the working class of this country. He knew their struggle because it was his struggle. It was his own. But the hardship of his young life, a life of poverty, a life of nothing, coming from nothing, was soon dwarfed by a tragedy that would shape his life in his young life and his adult life forever. When he was just 12 years old, his older brother, Jack, a hero of young J.R. Cash, died in a horrific mill incident made famous by the movie Walk the Line about Johnny Cash's life. The loss was so devastating to young Johnny Cash that, again, his father reportedly told him personally, "The wrong one died. God took the wrong son." Such horrific words to say to somebody who had just lost their brother. But those words, in fact, burrowed deep into Johnny Cash's soul, planting a seed of guilt and darkness that would follow him throughout his entire life. He would carry this with him for the rest of his life, leading to many drastic actions that we'll talk about in this podcast episode today, dedicated to the Man in Black. So this early life, steeped in dirt road poverty and profound loss to the man, became the bedrock of his art, where he, as the Man in Black, was truly born, not truly born by some odd persona, but by his actual life, not as a stage costume, but as an outward reflection of his darkness and his upbringing in his life. So he knew and intimately, personally, in his soul, his rebellion didn't start with an audience. The audience was the last thing on his mind from a young age, singing in church choirs. It started in those cotton fields, a quiet defiance against a world that truly seemed hell-bent, mind you, on crushing the human spirit. But Johnny Cash didn't let this get to him. Let's get more into his career and how he truly established the Man in Black label, which I greatly admire his music. The Man in Black, Cocaine Blues, Folsom Prison Blues, Walk the Line, all amazing, amazing songs. But let's get more into his upbringing. So Johnny Cash did serve in the United States Air Force. He basically landed in Memphis and walked into legendary Sun Records, the famous studio label back then. And that the same studio that launched Elvis Presley's career. Mind you, Elvis Presley, very famous. He auditioned for the producer, of course, Sam Phillips, with a gospel song. But Phillips saw something else besides the gospel singing that he was incredibly good at to begin with, he saw grit and told him to write something real, something meaningful and personal to him, not the time period of where everybody was basically making famous gospel songs. Cash returned with hits like Hey Porter, Cry, 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 which many listeners of Johnny Cash music know to this day, which pulse with his signature boom, boom, chicka, boom kind of, where they call it rockabilly music. But again, that clash between country, gospel, making ultimately country music what it is today. So his star, he ended up hitting famous songs like I Walk the Line, a song of devotion that ironically hinted at the struggle he had soon to be faced in his life. But as his fame grew, right, so did the pressure, the mounting pressure of his life, of brutal touring schedules and studios, and leading him to basically a dangerous lifestyle, that whole lifestyle of rock and roll, drugs, gambling, addiction to methamphetamines, and basically much more than that, alcohol and drinking. And this was the rebellion against the squeaky clean image of the country music star known as Johnny Cash. But while his peers wore basically flashy rhinestone type of clothing, suits, different color suits, different ties, stripes, patterns, Cash was falling apart basically. And he chose to wear black. The color black, something that symbolized him, who he was initially. It may have been practical, a choice for too long, basically, that was leading to like, hey, is there something else that need to be said here? You're doing all this stuff to yourself. You're destroying your body. You need that suit sooner or what? But it became his uniform, a stark contrast to the polished Nashville look. And this changed the entertainment industry. So for so many people at the time, his performances grew erratic. He was coming in undone in public, waging war against his own persona, who he was, his own demons, his own personal hell. The Man in Black wasn't just it wasn't a look, although it looked good, sold records, probably had a lot of women after Johnny Cash, but it was becoming the essence of who Johnny Cash was. And that's why this story is so incredible of the Man in Black, Johnny Cash. So as Johnny Cash was developing this persona about him, he developed a very unique voice, and he used that as basically a voice to the voiceless. By the late 1960s, Johnny Cash was an outcast, a complete outcast of mainstream country music. His addiction had badly taken over his life, had basically took him out of music, basically made him unreliable. People didn't respect him, and basically his sympathies for the counterculture that was going on at the time made him a complete suspect. He was an outcast. Nobody really wanted to be around him. So instead of conforming to that, a type of mindset, he leaned to his outlaw image, which basically made him. He doubled down on many things, and he doubled down on the color black, the color he chose basically to don when he was getting more popular, turning it from a simple clothing choice into a powerful message, a powerful statement that today still resonates with so many people. This defiance was famously symbolized by his all black attire. And it wasn't just a gimmick. This was a testament to who Johnny Cash was. As he explained in his 1971 song, the famous song, Man in Black, it was a conscious choice, basically. He wore black for people that were underrepresented, for the poor and beaten down. If you listen to the song, it's a great song, living in the hopeless, hungry side of town. For the prisoner who has long paid for his crime, but is there because he's a victim of the time. Such great lyrics. Great lyrics that basically inspired country music and country folk all over. And the mourning for the lives lost in the Vietnam War was heavily against the conflict itself, not against the troops, but the conflict. It was a stark rebellion against the gaudy optimism of his Nashville peers, basically. He wrote that song in defiance. Nowhere was this more powerful than when he walked on stage at Folsom Prison, 1968. For those unfamiliar, Johnny Cash did a sweeping tour of prisons and sang to prisoners all around the country as a devout Christian. Recording a live album in front of convicted felons was seen as commercial suicide. But when he actually started doing it, and he snarled and he came on the stage and said, "Hello, I'm Johnny Cash," the room exploded it exploded just as much as if he was just doing a performance at the Grand Ole Opry or many of these other places. And it was a massive, massive success that completely revitalized his career. And he owes a lot of that to him finding his faith. These weren't just concerts. They were acts of radical empathy for people that had been convicted. And the Man in Black wasn't just singing about basically justice and wasn't just standing up for people that he viewed as just like him. He was standing with them in a way, forcing the world to acknowledge, to people to see it, and for the people that had been forgotten to let them know that they still exist. Leading to many other big developments in the life of Johnny Cash, the Man in Black, created another song called The Ring of Fire. And at the height of his fame, just when he was starting to climb back up, getting back into the limelight, Johnny Cash was losing his battle with addiction. And his first marriage had basically gone bad, had crumbled, and had fallen completely apart. And he was teetering on basically complete self-destruction. Complete self-destruction. And then he found redemption. He did, in a person, June Carter. June Carter of the legendary Carter family in the country music dynasty. Basically had co-written Ring of Fire, a song that became very famous for Johnny Cash, a song describing the fiery love she had felt for Johnny Cash and why she had fell for him in the first place. She saw the good man that was buried beneath all the drugs, all the addiction, all the bad habits, all the darkness of his life, which is such a beautiful testament to him and their love. But symbolized by the black attire, June and her family moved into his house determined to get him clean, to get him sober, and to help clean up his life. She flushed his pills down the toilet, destroyed all his drugs, and stood by him through all his withdrawals and all the relapses. And in 1968, he proposed to her on stage. It's a very famous scene, also made famous by the movie Walk the Line. Great movie, by the way. And their marriage brought a new stability to the chaotic life. But June did more. June Carter did more than just stabilize him. She was his creative and spiritual anchor. You know, the people in your life that you would have to wonder, where would I be without this person? June Carter was that to Johnny Cash. She didn't extinguish his rebellious fire. She helped him aim it and become more precise in his actions to actually do it for a good cause. And with her support, his rebellion transformed massively from self-destruction into a righteous anger directed at either injustice. And June Carter, amazing woman, June Carter didn't save Johnny Cash from being just the Man in Black. She saved him for it. Not just for who he was, but for him as a person. And just going through all that, why Johnny Cash and the Man in Black is still so relevant today. So just leading up to it. So by the late 1980s, the Nashville music machine had largely forgotten him totally. These were institutions and these were places that he helped build and create famous. His records weren't selling. And he was dropped by basically a lot of his big sponsors, his longtime label. But Johnny Cash had other plans to revitalize his career and just who he was. Johnny Cash had one last rebellion left, and it would be his most profound. In 1994, he teamed up with basically a producer, Rick Rubin, known for a lot of great music, known for his work with either hip hop and hard rock. And now it was time for them to create a relationship with the Man in Black. Rubin's idea was radical. Just Cash, Johnny Cash, his guitar, and his voice. No Nashville gloss, no big Grand Ole Opries, no slick productions, just the ultimate 2-on-2, two to tango. Johnny Cash, the Man in Black, and his guitar. That's it. So the result of this, American Recordings, which was a great album, I'd highly recommend it. Again, on CD, on CD-ROM, but saying that's old school now. But basically, a stripped bare collection of songs that were breathtaking. They're still breathtaking today. In its raw honesty, he covered artists as diverse as basically leading up to basically as Tom Watts and many others, Soundgarden. He teamed up with a lot of different type of artists. And what that did is he inhabited their lyrics with a lifetime of pain and wisdom, which made his albums with American Recordings that much more successful. This era culminated in the powerful 2002 music video for the cover of American Recordings of the 9 Inch Nails song, Hurt. And that is such an emotional video if you were to watch it. Just even if you didn't know the man personally, it just is it's a combination of clips reflecting on Johnny Cash's life and his turbulent past and just everything he's been through. And the song is just incredible. It's a devastating mediation on mortality and regret and living your life. And he rebelled against just basically irrelevance, against age, and against being told his time was past, like a lot of people are, that his time was over. He cemented his legacy as brutally honest as only the Man in Black could be, to the very last breath. So Johnny Cash's rebellion was never just about an image. It was never about just being the Man in Black, just wearing black as a gimmick. Wearing black was a symbol of authenticity. It stood for the darkness of the world and the darkness of life, of his youth, of his upbringing, and his defiance, utter defiance against the same system, the same Nashville system that he helped build up, that didn't want no part of him in the end, and his solidarity with the forgotten. He was a walking contradiction. Again, a sinner, like all of us. We all fall short of the glory of God, but a sinner who sang gospel, an outlaw who loved his family, a superstar who stood with people he didn't know, who stood with the downtrodden, who stood with people that were incarcerated for endless amounts of years. He stood with people and showed his scars to the world. And in doing so, the Man in Black, Johnny Cash, became a voice for every flawed, struggling, and hopeful soul. For all of our perseverance pioneers out there, what's one of your favorite Johnny Cash songs? We're curious about that. There's so many. Cry, 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 Folsom Prison Blues, The Man in Black. He did a whole album the album was called America. What is your favorite Johnny Cash song? Check out more of our content, Perseverance Pioneers, and we're on a mission to get to 250 followers and subscribers. So hit that follow button, hit that like button,